WMUR and the New Hampshire Political Library, with funding from the Citizens Bank Foundation, present this Commitment 2008 special, Conversation with the Candidate. Tonight, Congressman Ron Paul.
Good evening and welcome to our series, Conversation with the Candidate. Over the next few months, we'll introduce you to the Democrats and the Republicans who want to be the next President of the United States. Tonight, we're talking with Congressman Ron Paul of Texas. Congressman, thanks for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you. It's real nice to be here.
Nice to have you. In just a few minutes, I'll have some questions for the Congressman. Then we'll take some questions from our live studio audience of New Hampshire voters. But first, here's a look at the Congressman's background.
Ron Paul was born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, moving to Texas in 1968, where he became a doctor. Ron Paul has a wife and 5 children. He joined the Libertarian Party in 1987, but was elected to Congress as a Republican. He served in the U.S. Air Force as a flight surgeon during the 1960s before becoming a specialist in obstetrics, delivering more than 4,000 babies. Paul was the Libertarian Party nominee for president in the 1988 election. Following that failed presidential bid, he returned to Congress in 1997. He's not a household name, but Republican Representative Ron Paul of Texas hopes his voting record in Washington sets him apart in the race for president.
And again, we're happy to introduce all of you to Congressman Ron Paul. Congressman, tell us, why are you running for president?
My main goal to run for president is the same goal that I had for all my activities in politics, and that is always to shrink the size and scope of government and to maximize individual liberty. And the trends in the last several years, if not decades, has been to expand the size and scope of government and minimize and attack personal liberty, so there's a lot of room for improvement.
Give us a couple of examples of how you would shrink the size and scope.
Well, what I would do is put pressure on everybody I know to obey the Constitution. And if we obeyed the Constitution, the government would be very, very small. And I think we abuse the Constitution. So that would be the greatest emphasis. So a president can't do that by himself. I mean, you have to have a consent of the people, you have to have the Congress, you have to have the courts, because everybody's writing laws these days, not just the Congress. The president writes laws, he has executive orders, he has signing statements with bills, he has the executive branch are writing regulations all the time, you have courts writing laws. So it has to be done in a pervasive way, but it has to be done by the people deciding they want smaller government. But I think there's a large number of people who are coming around to that viewpoint, and that's sort of the contest going on. Those who want bigger government and more stuff in the government versus those who are tired of big government and tired of paying for it. And then there are those who would like big government who are coming to realize we can't afford any more big government because this country's going broke.
Let me give you a specific example. I know when the Department of Homeland Security was created, you were a vocal critic of the department. Right. If, as president, you had the option, would you shut it down?
I would, but under the consideration of, what the transition would be like. There's a lot of things I'd like to shut down. I guess the thing that I'd shut down rather as quickly as possible would be the IRS or something like that. But the Department of Homeland Security, creating a gigantic bureaucracy and bringing together departments after department, they're still in the process of doing this after 5 years. And I don't think the solution is bureaucracy and central government and central economic planning. I mean, even on things like dealing with hurricanes right in my district along the Gulf Coast, I think central economic planning fails. And just think of what happened down there with the idea that the government was going to take care and solve all this problems. It's a bureaucratic approach to something that should be done more locally, more voluntarily with smaller government. So the Department of Homeland Security, I would put in that category. And whether or not you can, with the stroke of the pen, close it down, there should be a transition, but you'd have to be a major revamping of attitudes because they're still in the transition of trying to centralize this power, and bureaucracies don't work. So I think reversing that trend would be very important.
Could you still assure our national defense and our homeland security, if you will? Would we still be protected?
Well, I think it would be a lot better. I mean, where our troops are all over the world, and we can't even protect our own borders. So I would say there's a lot you could do. You'd have to change your foreign policy, and you'd have to change attitudes. You know, most people are safe and secure in their homes not because there's a policeman standing outside or a government bureaucrat outside. We're safe in our homes because we're willing to defend our homes, especially in Texas, and I'll bet you here in New Hampshire is the same case. People know that you just can't invade other people's homes. So I think emphasizing personal responsibility and the Second Amendment and a few of these other things would go a lot more to protecting security. There certainly is a role for all governments to play in security, of police activity and the military. But I think our military is, you know, really in shambles right now because they're not well equipped. They're all around the world. We're in 150 countries today, and yet we're closing down our bases here in this country. So I would say you could have a lot stronger defense of this country if we reoriented our thinking. Today it seems like we're every place trying to solve everybody's problem and antagonizing the world against us, which to me is why we're more vulnerable than ever.
Talking about the troops, let's shift focus to Iraq a little bit. I know in the months after 9/11, as the focus of debate in Congress began to shift over to Iraq, you were a vocal critic of going to war in the first place. You raised a lot of questions about it. If you had the power right now, what would you do?
I'd bring the troops home.
Bring them all home.
It was a bad idea to go. And if it was a bad idea to go and it's not going well, why keep doing the same thing? It's sort of like in medicine. If I make a wrong diagnosis and give the wrong medication, then I discover it. I mean, I say, well, I have to give you more of the same medicine. I mean, that kills the patient. So in this case, I think that we're not solving our problem. Matter of fact, when that came up on the IR Committee, International Relations Committee, I brought up a resolution that said I was against the war 5 years before it started. Starting in 1998, I started talking against it because that was when the resolution was passed for regime change. And that was under the previous administration. And so I argued against it 5 years before it happened because it wasn't 9/11. That plan was in place for many, many years to go into Iraq. And so I brought up a resolution in the IR Committee. Instead of transferring this authority to the President and going to war to enforce UN resolutions, I said, look, if you want to go to war, declare war. And it was voted down unanimously, including myself. I voted against it. But they wanted war, and they said, no, we don't want the responsibility. We'll give it to the President, let him decide. And I think it's wrong. I think it's unconstitutional. Delivering authority, that's amending the Constitution. And, of course, the other reason we went, not only to enforce UN resolutions, was we were threatened. Our security was threatened by Iraq. Well, that's all been disproven. So to persist in this, how many more men do you want to kill? Proven a falsehood. You know, we went there for the wrong reason. We shouldn't have gone. And just to stay there out of stubbornness. Now the only argument left for staying is that if we leave, there'll be chaos. And I won't argue too much with that, but we don't know. There might be less chaos. There might be more. They might decide to take care of their own problems. When we left Vietnam, there wasn't more chaos. There was, you know, eventually now we're trading partners. We subsidize and all with Vietnam. So we don't know. But I do know that if we did leave, Americans would be no longer would be killed, and your tax dollars and our military people would no longer be required to kill other people in a war that is undeclared. But the argument now by the administration is, we're at war, we have to do this, and you can't back away, we have to win this war. If there's a war, why didn't they declare it? And I think that's why I harp back to the Constitution all the time. If we'd follow the Constitution, we would be very less likely to get ourselves in these messes, whether it's domestic, entitlement programs, and all these issues that we're involved with, the educational system. It's because we're so careless about the Constitution. If we want the government to do these things, if we want the President to go to war like the kings used to and let him decide, we should amend the Constitution. If you want the federal government to run your educational system, the Department of Education, and have no child left behind, change the Constitution. Otherwise, there's nothing left of the Constitution. And I think that's about where we are today.